Have I ever been in a toxic work environment? One might say, but I navigated it fine. Oh God. I'm Stephen Taylor. Sometimes life is exhausting, but you keep on moving. For the last 10 years, I've been building a cybersecurity IT support company here in Chicagoland, and I'm fascinated by living a wholly successful life in all tenets. So we talk about all of this and more every single week. Like, share, and subscribe. We talked about in another video about, the grass is always greener, or, should I just sell my business? Wouldn't it be nice to live on the beach and, get my check and all that kind of stuff? And I think that at times when we look at different things in our life and we make some of these decisions, or we're really thinking about some of these decisions, life has a way of kind of testing us or trying us, or something doesn't go right, or something breaks, or it doesn't go the way we thought it would, right? And that I believed, and I've learned to really reframe it as, it doesn't mean bail out, it doesn't mean go back, it doesn't mean retreat. It actually is a sign, because it is this test to see, are you really serious about the shift that you're about to make in your life? And so, if you start to maybe pursue the sale of your business or something, for instance, then maybe you get your biggest client ever, and it's like, oh, are we serious about this? It's testing you to really, see your drive in your direction, and to see if you're going to see it through. And I think it's those challenges that help us maybe to solidify that decision, or retreat in fear, go back to our old ways, go back to what's comfortable, go back to what's easy, right? Instead of testing and challenging and growing ourselves through that, and picking up more resolve towards the end result or the goal that we have in mind, right? So, for us, in an interesting way, right, going through that, reading the book Before the Exit, oh, am I going to sell the business, right? Of course, it was a ridiculous thing. But I kind of made this commitment again this year to say, no, we're going to double down, we're going to make it work. And then COVID happens, right? And how challenging that is. And there's been more stuff past that. And, our Chicagoland area not unlocking as fast as the rest of the country, and different things that are going on in politics and government and all that stuff. And, we won't go into those details, but there are clearly, challenges and issues that we have to now navigate. And it makes it hard to continue with that gusto and that drive of, we're going to double down, we're doing awesome, everything's going to be amazing, right? When you kind of get these setbacks or these, off courses. And it's the squalls or the weather patterns that we have no control over, right? And we just have to keep sailing through on to the destination. And it's going to slow us down. It's going to, impact us in such a way. But in the end game, in the goal and the vision that we've set forth, in anything in life, it's a minor setback and you have to see it as such, but life will certainly test your resolve. I didn't know this at the time. I wasn't self-aware enough, right? But when I first started off on my own, I was on my own, right? I quit my job and, opened up shop as me. And for the first 8 months of the year, I was fully focused on making that work and trying to get it rolling and everything else. And I had some success, but it wasn't enough, or I saw it as it wasn't going to be enough, right? And so around my birthday in August, I gave myself another 4 months, and I said that if by the end of the year I don't have this really up and going, right, and I can make a go at it, then I'll just go get a job, right? Because, you can only live in poverty so much, right? And I knew somebody, I was around somebody else who was doing a similar kind of thing, right? He had been in business for a few years actually, and had a small subset of clients, and was a one-man IT shop, right? Somehow, within that kind of 2 month, like I had some clients, right? But within that 2 month period, I was able to ramp up so much that I brought the same that he had. And so we were even Stevens on clients and revenue, if you will. And the self-aware part was I was fearful. I was fearful that I wasn't good enough, that I couldn't do it on my own, that I needed somebody else, right? And so for me at the time, it looked like a good opportunity. And I didn't navigate the things I know now better to navigate, which is probably true in any relationships, right? It's the same stuff that we always talk about, core values, right? Is that person's values synonymous with yours? Because it's, even in dating or even in social, it's not about what bands they like and the fun shit they like to do. It's Who are they at the core of themselves? Because that's the most important thing that's going to drive everything else. It's nice to have hobbies in common, of course, but more importantly, do they stand for the same things that you do? And that framework should be applied in everything you do, right? From business partnerships to relationships to social to the clients that we deal with, right? Our values are at the core of everything we do, right? And I didn't navigate those things at the time because I just thought, well, I need somebody else to make this work. And it would be easier. I thought it would be easier. Well, 3 years in, I learned that it wasn't. We became 50-50 partners right away. And we were able to grow the business very quickly and start hiring our first employees within a year or two. But 3 years in, it really got to a tumultuous and a challenging place. And it was... our values weren't in line, right? My goal and my dream was to build a business that we would be able to impact a lot of team members and a lot of clients and have enough room to be able to do things bigger than ourselves, right? And my belief even then was, it's probably going to be bigger than 2 or 3 or 4 people, right? Because to really make some impact, you've got to be a little bit bigger. Whereas I think he believed that was it, right? Once you get your 3 or 4 people, that's it, and that's big enough, and that's all you need. And I realized as a business owner, there's about 95 different hats that you have to wear. And that I think was challenging for him, especially being that we had to manage employees and payroll now. And the profitability of the company was so much different than a solo entrepreneur who the money that you make is the money you make. And it's pretty straightforward and simple. I, even at the time, knew that to be able to grow this big business that I had in this dream and kept pushing us forward, that I was going to have to step out from the technical role, something I talked about a lot, right? He wouldn't let that go, and he really wanted to be involved in technical and everything else. But it just got to a place of contention where I felt like I was being the business owner trying to really run and grow a business, where I felt he only was interested in our one big client and creating projects and workload and really just focusing on them. And one of the things I learned out of that experience was that even if you're 50-50 partners or 60-40 partners or whatever it is, you have 2 roles when you're an owner. You are a shareholder at the top level who can, have a 50% ownership or whatever it might be and be paid in dividends as the business is doing well. There's profit sharing and there's the dividends that can be shared on an equal or 60-40 or whatever it is. But then 2, you're also an employee of the company, and employees of the company should be treated as such and have a fair wage for the things that they do, right? And so even if you are 50-50 partners in your business, you can operate where you receive 50% of the shareholder dividends, but you might be paid different salaries because you're doing different roles. And you need to look at what the market-based wage for that role is. If I go out and hire somebody, what is that going to cost us to bring them in? Thereby, I should be paid that. Whereas if the other person wants to be an absentee owner or really just a technician, or maybe they just want to do sales and marketing, then they could be paid fairly for that role that they play. Whereas the person who is full tilt and, working 80 hours a week and is wearing multiple hats, their salary may dictate more because it would cost 1 or 2 people to replace them in the role that they have. And so even if you are 50-50 partners, you can structure it in such a fashion where you get paid for the role that you do, as well as benefiting from the dividends or the shareholder returns. And that's something that we didn't have. And so it felt very unfair and very unjust, right? Especially given that I was burying myself completely in the company, and conversely, he was able to still check out at 5 o'clock and go home to family and things like that, which is still important, right? But again, the balance wasn't there. And it had become very tumultuous. We were battling back and forth, and it was, classic, rock'em sock'em and all that kind of stuff. And we just weren't getting anywhere. And so I made the decision, knowing what my vision was and the light at the end of the tunnel and all that stuff. And I pretty much just gave him, open-ended question, how much is it going to cost to get rid of you? And he gave me a number that he picked out of thin air and made up, and I made it happen. And, life tested me in a way there, right? The attorney that I worked with said I was, I think at one point he even called me stupid and said, this is a dumb choice. You shouldn't do this. This is ridiculous, the amount of money and everything else. And I said, no, I want to be able to take what we have and keep it intact and continue running it, right? And 7 years later now, the joke's on everyone else because I did exactly what I had set forth to do. And it turns out I actually didn't pay too much for it. I paid a reasonable market value for what we had at the time. And I've been able to more than triple it since. And so in a way, I set forth what I planned to do and I executed on it. But sometimes that stuff, does not come to fruition how we see it, and it takes time, and there's a lot of pain and agony and all those things, and life will test you throughout different situations to make sure you're serious about it. And I think a little bit of that was the attorney and just different things. But then conversely, there were signs that were telling me, I was doing the right thing, right? Because I knew that my mental health and my ability to continue to grow and be passionate about the business and the company was dwindling by the minute, being around, in my opinion, toxic energy. I think initially I was like, never again, right? Line in the sand, all that kind of stuff. I'm always open-minded for everything. I think I've seen others now over years have successful partnerships and how they've designed it. And it's like a marriage, right? There's ways to make it work. There's ways to fuck it up, but there's also ways to make it work. And so I think I'm open-minded to it somewhat, with guidelines, with rules, with different things, right? I think the biggest lesson learned out of that is 50-50 does not have to mean 50-50, right? And I think there's weight in that too, right? It would depend, right? Does a merger come up where a very similar business comes into, my view, and that person feels the same way, and we look to do, a partnership or a merger? I think there's opportunity in that, but I would definitely have to look at it. And I'm way more self-aware about, again, looking at those core values to make sure everything's a right fit, because the dollars and cents is never the important part. You can look at some of the operations things, but again, it's all about people and it's all about values. That will drive everything else. I too often see tumultuous, employer-employee relationships. And it drives me nuts, right? Because I'm so decisive. I'd be like, you got to go, you got to leave now. But I think for the individual who's involved in it, right, it's their livelihood. Their payroll check and everything else is the thing that fuels their life and is so important. And so it's very hard to fathom, switching a job or leaving a job and trying to get another one and things. Even though, right, it's this very challenging and hard situation. And I struggle with it too, because I believe, and I've seen, more and more businesses have more and more success when they care about the people involved. You will grow faster, you will become bigger, and you will do better in business and in life if you're a good human being and if you care about the other human beings involved. And it seems pretty simple to me, but yet so often we see, leadership by dictator and, the benefits and the payroll being pulled from the people actually doing the work and actually making the company successful. And sometimes that only goes to the top and, other bullshit like that. And it just drives me nuts, right? I kind of wish there was a, revolt against that kind of stuff and we all stood up against it, because it's not fair and it's not the right way to do things, from the human element. And then guess what? It turns out that if you are a better human and if you are a better leader and if you have empathy for your teams and your people, you'll probably run a more successful business. One of the things that I am interested in or intrigued by, and I haven't done enough research on it to figure it out, is employee stock ownership plans, ESOPs, which give, a certain subset or those that have had good tenure with the company. And it makes it so that they have voting rights. So instead of me as 100% owner making the decisions, running everything, having the control, so to speak, in an ESOP environment, each person who's an employee that has the vesting, they have one vote. And so companies might have, 25 employees, they might have 200 or 2,000. And each of those employees is a voting member, like a board would be, for the direction of that company. And then they're also incentivized, right? If we hit the certain financial benchmarks, then each of our employees gets that dividend payment and things like that. And so there's quite a few companies that I've seen run like that I'm intrigued by and interested in how that runs and how that works. But maybe part of me is like, all right, let's get a little bit more growth, build a little bit bigger, get to more of a stature where it's a little bit more less volatile, maybe more solidified. And then we could look to do a program like that. Because again, like anything, it takes more money and more cash to retool it, regear it. It'd be the capital gains thing, like all that kind of stuff. And as much as I own it and control it, I'm not like that. Like, my way is not always the right way or the best way. And I trust my people more than anything, right? I'm not the one dictating that we're going to run like this, right? I gather their feedback and get their input and let them design some of the programs and the way we operate and the different things, right? Like, here's my suggestions, here's my ideas, but you guys probably know better than I do, right? So I give kind of that control without, having it officially an ESOP or whatever else it might be. Like, that's just how I feel is the best way to run the business. So how has life tested you recently, and how did you get to the other side? Let me know in the comments below.